public servant with over 2 decades of service. A 1987 graduate of law from the University of Benin, Mr. Fashola was elected as Executive Governor of Lagos State, and he served in this capacity for 2 terms until 2015. In that same year, he was appointed by President Muhammadu Buhari as the Minister of Power, Works and Housing, and in 2019, he was reappointed as the Minister of Works and Housing, a position he held until last year. He has received several honors, including Man of the Year awards by leading publishers, including Guardian, The Vanguard, African Business Magazine, to name just a few. In 2013, Mr. Babatunde Fashola was named among top 100 global thinkers by Lo Spazio della Politica, a globally recognized personality assessment organization that has conferred him, and he has also been conferred with the Commander of the Order of the Niger, amongst many awards. He's a fellow of the Nigerian Institute of Arbitrators, a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Taxation of Nigeria, and the grand patron of the Association of Nigerian Theatre Practitioners. Babatunde Fashola is married to Dame Abimbola Fashola, and they are blessed with 2 children. Please join me. It's truly an honor to have His Excellency Babatunde Raji Fashola, SANCON.
Well, I think the place to start is to first confess that I am an avid viewer of the platform event for many years. And so I'm truly delighted to be Pastor and Mrs. Oyemade's guest today and to be in your midst. Well, Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, our audience, Bishop Kukah is a very, very difficult act to follow. So, and in that sense, the organizers have not done me well at all. But I will try. Now, our subject is about democracy and the economy, and I think that all of the speakers before me have done quite some very heavy lifting, and perhaps hopefully that should make it easier to follow Bishop Kukah. My position, and I adopt the definitions about market economies, free market economies, as allowing forces of demand and supply to operate, and I accept all the definitions of democracy as well. But my position, my concluding position, really is that the idea of a free market economy is an illusory one. The truth is that government continues historically and necessarily to play a role. So how do I get here? I start by talking about June 12, because this is the first June 12 platform event. And so that's important. So June 12, another day like any other day until 1993. And then after 1993, June 12 was not another day again. It became a different day. Because of the way people voted, because of what happened, and that was an election that transcended all of our default lines and areas of division. Suddenly, it became an election where people wanted to give everything to save it. And some did. Lives were lost, limbs were lost. And so, this is one of the reasons why we gather here today. For those who might be too young to wonder, what is this big deal about? It is because that was one area around which there was some large elite consensus, and not the elite of I. Thomas or you. Thomas that Bishop Kukah referred to. The real elite of Nigeria decided that this was an election worth paying every price for, and many did. And to the heroes and sheroes of that undertaking, I doff my hat. Because of them, we are here. The hope that that election promise was espoused by its symbol, late Chief Moshood Kashimawo Olawale Abiola, a billionaire businessman, entrepreneur turned politician. And that was perhaps the elixir that kept the quest and the agitation for the actualization of June 12 alive. Sadly, it was not to be. Another journey started from there. That journey led us to Democracy Day, May 29, 1999. Clearly, we are now back to Democracy Day, June 12 onwards. But I am building up to something, and it is that first, our democratic experience was midwifed not by something we actively participated in, by like a plebiscite. It was midwifed by a dictatorship. But as I have argued, those who say they don't want the 1999 constitution should go and read Justice Nikitobi's speech. That was a constitution in which everybody participated. And all of the participants said, give us back the 1979 constitution with some amendments. So it is probably not true that the military just gave us a constitution. There was a constitution committee and we participated by directly or indirectly. So that's not the point I'm making. But the point I'm making is that dictatorial actions led to the emergence of what we commemorate to celebrate today, 25 years after. But there is a coincidence. And that coincidence is that as we talk of democracy and we are converging to discuss the idea of a free market economy, Nigeria's free market economy, or the journey to it, also was started by the military. So that might surprise some of us. And I make the point here that there is a decree called Decree number 25 of 1988, which was later amended in 1999, and that is the decree known as the Privatization and Commercialization Decree, which created the Technical Committee on Privatization and Commercialization. That is the place where our journey to a free market economy started. So, point to note, the two ideas around which we converse today did not evolve from a free area. It evolved from a dictatorial arena. So, let's go forward there. What do I want to make here? To mention to people who are perhaps younger than 30 years to note or to learn, and if they are aware, to remember that at one time in this country, banks, newspapers, companies, telephones, radio and television, and other businesses that are now run by the private sector, including dispensing petrol at the tap, used to be government business. Yeah, I hear some That's how it was. Government was playing in these fields. So it was that decree that led to the journey of privatization. Government started yielding the space. So that's how we are where we are today. There used to be only one phone company called Nitel. It was owned by government. So they just wake up when they need money. They disconnect everybody. They call it on toss. So we all carry our files and go and head to Nitel office to go and find out whether you are owing or not owing. And then they start looking for your peer, which line. So, but how did that process happen? The Bureau of Public Enterprises, which is the agency of the National Council on Privatization, has undertaken 234 transactions. 234, as at the last time I checked. And what were those transactions about? They were about the sale, the concessioning, and the privatization of government-owned businesses. What types of businesses did they sell? They sold 32 agricultural mechanization businesses. They sold 31 banking and insurance businesses. They sold 15 cement companies. They sold 14 energy construction and services companies. They sold 13 hotels. They sold 9 industrial and manufacturing companies, 13 oil and gas companies, and concessioned or sold 31 ports, 22 power companies, 37 mines and steel businesses, 8 automobile businesses, 4 paper and packaging businesses, 4 sugar making companies, and 1 telecoms company, the famous Nitel. So just dwell on that data a bit, because it will become meaningful as our conversation goes on. So if you hear about the glorious days of Nigeria, 30 years, 40 years ago, that was the time when government was doing these businesses. So as the speaker before me, Bishop Kuka, said before he left, what do we really want? Have we defined success? Because if we don't, sometimes we might get to the point of success and not recognize it. So what will success look like? That will be a conversation that will go on beyond here. And that will be something perhaps the elite have to deal with. But we came from that glorious period when that was happening. So the advocates of market economy came and said, no, government is not a good businessman. Get out of this business. Government shouldn't be involved in business. And so we started that journey of privatization. Is that the right thing to do? Perhaps if you compare some of the people we now do business with, like China, most of those Chinese construction companies you see here are government owned. Most of those people are civil servants. And they are creating prosperity. But what do we want? That would be a decision that we all have to take as we go on. But it's just to provide two sides of the coin. So, I say then that in the ideal market economy, what wants to be seen is the unhindered operation of the forces of demand and supply. That's the ideal market economy. And in that market, customer or the consumer is king. Okay? And government does not provide props in order to support the system. And has this happened across many of our sectors? So if we interrogate, I go quickly to a sector in which I was involved, the energy area. But let's start from petroleum products. So in the last 12 months, government has removed what is clearly an unsustainable subsidy in petroleum pricing. So in that good old days, government was paying for it, not so? Hello? So Governor Soludo will know how much Central Bank was paying for every month so that government could give us petrol. And also we could buy rice at an amount much lower than what it is, because government decided to say, economic forces, wait a minute, let me look after my people first. But it comes at a cost somewhere. Somebody has to pay for it. So, but that was what we were doing with our FX. So if you bought 7,000 naira rice a few years back, it wasn't because it was 7,000. It was because government was providing some props. So immediately those props go. It's almost like somebody who uses a cane to walk. If you take it, the person will start to stumble. And I think the analogy makes the point as quickly as I possibly can. But then we go to the power sector. And again, in spite of privatization, which took place it was concluded in 2013. It started in 2005. We said to government, you can't run electricity. PSCN is not working. Sell it. Let private people bring their money, and we were heading to El Dorado. And government accepted. We, the people, decided, through the likes of Honorable Dogara and all the parliamentarians, they passed a law. So, wait now, calm down. Every time a law is passed in the National Assembly, the truth is that we passed that law. The people who enacted those laws did so on our behalf. And this is the point that one of the speakers makes about getting involved. So we, the Nigerian people, said, go and pass that law, take the power from the government, they don't know about it, give it to private sector. And so it was. But one of the interesting things that they put in the law was that they created a company called NBET, Nigeria Bulk Electricity Trading Corporation. NBET was the bulk buyer, guaranteeing to Soludo Energy that once you produce the power, I will buy it. Somewhere along the line, after buying, NBET wants to give the energy to Oyemade Disco to go and distribute. But in between that transaction, Oyemade Disco is not collecting enough because some people are enjoying electricity illegally. In some places, the energy is not even getting there, but it has been wheeled. So, a shortfall in yours. Oyemade Disco can return all the monies that it should give to Soludo, this thing. And then there is a default in the system because Soludo Genco is owing Dogara Gas. No, this is the reality. I was in that ministry. Soludo Genco is owing Dogara Gas. And then Dogara Gas is owing the banks. So government has to step in. Market forces can't do this. That's the point. So when we then went to Central Bank to go and borrow 701 billion, I think, to pay the Gencos, we were not implementing a subsidy. The bulk trader was paying his debt to the Gencos. But it had an account receivable from the Discos. And some people have erroneously categorized that as a subsidy. With respect, I beg to disagree. It's not a subsidy. Because NBET, the unpaid creditor, has remedies in law against his debtor. So, but I will leave the point. I just wanted to make that point. Let's quickly now go to Asset Management Company or Corporation of Nigeria. You know that company, AMCON. Is AMCON consistent with the idea of a free market economy? Because the idea of a free market economy in some jurisdictions is that if you become insolvent, you go down with consequences. But what did we do? So we formed AMCON because 300 Nigerians were threatening the financial system. They were owing about 2.5 trillion, so we bought their debt. Interestingly, some of the people whose debts were bought and saved by government through AMCON were some of those we later handed over some of the power assets to run. I know that because I saw the records. So, but let's move on. So, I make this point, therefore, that the fact, however, is that some of the strongest apostles of a market economy are the very first people, very first, to reach out to the state as a sovereign, to say, please come and exercise your powers of Leviathan. Come and save us. So when COVID-19 hobbled the global economy, all the governments of major, if not all economies, did something or the other inconsistent with market principles. They needed to restart the economies. Some printed money, some borrowed money, and put it in terms of grants, releases, and aids. That's not a market economy idea. If it fails, everybody goes. But it doesn't work like that in real life. And that's the point that I thought we should all bear in mind. In the aftermath of the war between Ukraine and Russia, energy prices skyrocketed in most of Europe. The United Kingdom, one of our long-standing allies, what did they do? They went in and gave millions of households about £350 each to combat that. Is that consistent with market economy? So, And we have seen here with our efforts to price discovery in the FX market, coupled with the impact of subsidy removal, everybody is reaching out or has taken or is still expecting what? One palliative or the other. And they have come in different ways from our own government. There's also a report that about 200,000 people have received about 50,000 somewhere. So what the point to make is that government continuously has to and has historically stepped in. So in support of my thesis that the market economy is an illusion. But now, what kind of democracy are we even dealing with? And I think that I am thankful that it is Bishop Kuka who has had to speak to the emerging divergence, if you like, of the types of democracies that we are seeing across the world today. A school that is favoring the less liberal democracy in the sense that it helps to radically develop societies much more quickly. And if I can just borrow an analogy, we will see that the Chinas of this world, even the undemocratic ones like Saudi Arabia, monarchies, are the places that are delivering the most rapid developments. And I once gave a speech that democracy does not guarantee good governance. And some people were wondering why. And I said then that it is the institutions of democracy that will take us inevitably to good governance. But what economy are we even talking about in the Nigerian sense? So I go to the idea that our economy is predominantly small businesses, MSMEs. There's a data that shows that there are about 40 million of them. There's a national policy document that shows that they employ about 59.6 million people as of 2017 and account for 49%, almost 50% of Nigeria's GDP. That document, that data clearly shows that that is where the critical mass is. So if the critical mass is there, what should we do to unleash unprecedented growth and economic prosperity? I think the jury is out. There are those who think that access to credit alone will be the single magic bullet that does it. Some believe that it is electricity, access to power. Some think that it is a combination of those two and more. My argument is that if we pause and ask ourselves, seriously, this is where the mass is, and we can impact change there. I imagine that if we got 10% of those 40 million businesses, just 10% of them, to employ one person each, that means that we will have 4 million jobs, sustainable jobs. So I think that the road to that discovery is that we must be deliberate to search for the answer by way of very clear diagnosis, not guesswork. Looking at that critical mass and say, what can we really do? And I think surveys, data, a lot of consultation will help us to say, this is the road to prosperity. And if we implement this, can each of those small businesses guarantee that they will employ one person each in a sustainable job? And if we can produce that, then we will be able to start sharing with the world what we have done in a most dramatic and emphatic way to lift people out of poverty. But I then go to the point that our global realities show examples of subsidies from country to country. And you can check this out on your search engines. And they are deployed to influence either production, to influence consumption, to influence industrialization, or generally to impact economic outcomes. To the extent also that countries and governments use fiscal tools such as tariffs and levies to impact local and international trade, you will see that the idea of a market economy is an illusory one, whether it is local or international. On the international stage, they don't leave market growth, trade surpluses, they don't leave them to market forces. They, in a way, spice them by action. So, I now go to where the convergence lies. And I'm happy that it is my predecessors on this podium who have referred to the Singaporean model. So while I was preparing my notes on this thing, I had a brain trust of some of my colleagues, and I said to them, look, listen, where is the sweet spot in this? Where lies the ability for markets to work, government to work, and also allows the economy to thrive as best as possible? And one of them said to me, don't you remember Singapore? Don't you remember your meeting with Lee Kuan Yew? You know the answer to what you are looking for. You met him in 2000. I said, yes, that's true. Because he was then telling me the story of his visit to Nigeria, asking me about Balogun market and all of that. And I said, how did you know? He said, I came to your country where we were thrown out of Malaysia. I came here to look for help. Some of the housing models they started with were adaptations of what LEDB, which later became LSDPC, used to be. But that's a story for another day. But why is that relevant? The model in Singapore was a model of tough love. Let me say that again, tough love. And there is no better example of tough love that I find than a mother's love. You know why? If we were allowed to choose what we will eat every morning at home, okay, children, what are you going to eat? You know that we won't eat. Even if it was limited to just yam, some people want it fried, some people want it boiled, some people want it mashed. You know a mother's tough love? She just talks to her husband. She knows what his allergies are. She knows what he will not eat and what he will. And say, breakfast is served, children, come and eat. So there's no debate. There's not too much consultation with the eyes have it. Apologies to Dogara. And there's not too much issues. And so I think there lies what I think is a convergence. And the road to that convergence is that today, my interactions with some of the officials long after that first meeting showed me that in their country today, once price rises, within 90 days, they index it, whether it goes up or down. So once global oil prices goes up or energy prices, they just index it within 90 days, everybody carries on. Because there is sufficient knowledge, there is sufficient education, there has been enough time to integrate into the practice of democracy and the realities of market economy. Now, that is the kind of knowledge that I would like to see in this country. To understand that, look, why are we hiding behind a finger? Is there anybody here who has not adjusted cost of living prices at his home? I'm sure Mrs. Oyemade agrees that Mr. Oyemade has increased the housekeeping allowance because some things have moved. So how are we expecting that it will be different in the real world out there? So I close with two examples about this. So recently, government, through the regulator, NERC, announced an increase in our electricity tariffs. Not so? So, but what did we get? Apart from many voices of dissent, there was one from Parliament, our Parliament. Motions and resolutions for the suspension of the tariff. Really? But we seem to have forgotten that that tariff came into life as a result of the law that Parliament itself made. So that cannot be the answer. And I think that in future the answer should be to get involved in that process very early. Because if things have changed in real life, the conversation we should then be having is that, look, what is the quantum of change? Not that it should not change. I think that's the conversation we should be having. Because if we can't produce that power for ourselves, if we went to buy all the components, the gas, the transmission line, how then can we expect somebody else to do it at a lower price? The second example, and I will close. Recently, we had an amendment to an existing Cybersecurity Act, and it led to the imposition of a levy of 0.5%. Excuse me. So, that is a law that imposes a tax. Not so? Now, that's the principle of representation, age-old principle, taxation and representation. But what did we get? A trade union came out and said that there will be a murder of all strikes because a tax had been imposed. And they were going to shut down the country. Is that the answer, really? And I'm saying this so that we understand how democracy works. But thankfully, I was watching Seun Okinbaloye's program on PoliticsToday, and he very sensibly asked one of the intending protesters that, is it the Nigerian government, qua the executive, that has offended you, or your legislator? Why don't you go and call your legislator back to say you don't want this levy, and they should get back to repeal it? And I think somewhat he saved the day. Again, these are some of our extreme and default positions to government or legislative or regulatory action that we don't understand how the process plays. So sometimes, like playing a sport without knowing the rules, you are likely to commit fouls. So I close that I would only add that true democratic representation in a time of rising cost of living will be symbolized not just by giving food palliatives, which serves a purpose for a selection of the population, but will be complemented by a raft of legislation that bring fiscal relief by way of reduction of certain taxes and levies, in addition to wage adjustments which are on the way. So that is my intervention. I think the idea is elusive, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for that powerful intervention. Another round of applause, please, as we take our seats. Very fundamental thoughts and questions, one of which lingers in my